Welcome everyone to the Starting Point Education Channel's podcast. My name is Loretta Depka, and I am thrilled tonight to have Dr. Ken Goldberg join us to talk about what is a true relationship. As we go through this conversation, you have to realize that Ken is he has an eclectic approach to psychology. So that's why we're talking about a true relationship instead of a good relationship. They can be one and the same, right, Ken?
Well, they can, and good relationships in many ways are related to being real. And as I said to you when we talked about the topic, I'm struck by the fact that most people don't know what a real relationship is. They don't have models of other people's relationships. They maybe hear their friends bitch about what's going wrong. I, as a psychologist, may hear people come in and complain about what's going on. But if someone has a good relationship, they come to see me. They have a good relationship. They came to talk about something else. So I've always been very struck by the fact that most people don't know what goes on in a relationship. And that can be a great relationship. It can be an okay relationship. But most people don't know what goes on in other people's lives and don't really know what makes a relationship good.
Okay. Well, as we talk about this, Ken, let me just do something that I think is really unique, and that's a quote that you carry on our website. Besides the fact that you're a clinical psychologist with over 43 years of experience, I love your quote that you talk about your practice. Through my years of work in mental health, I have been honored to meet many people, the average person encountering temporary personal problems, the highly impaired individual who is tormented by psychosis, the abused child and the abusive parent, the person who is no longer able to work, and the floundering child who cannot finish the homework. Throughout, I've been awed by how our commonalities overshadow our differences. In the end, my clinical philosophy and psychotherapeutic approach are profoundly defined by a deep respect for the inherent worth and dignity of every human being. I love that, Ken, about you, because I see you do it every day. So I just wanted to sort of give that as a precursor to this conversation, because with the number of years of experience and also your respect for people, no matter from all walks of life, it's really important that people listening to that know this.
Well, it's interesting when you read that quote that I did put on the website, and there's two places where it comes from. The inherent worth and dignity of all human beings comes straight from one of the 7 principles of the Unitarian Universalist Church, which I belong to, and I've loved that piece over everything else I've learned there. So it has that religious grounding to it. But the other issue is, as you say, I've been in the field 43 years, but right from the beginning, I saw the commonalities between me and other people. No matter how bad their problems were, I was aware that we were of the same substance. We were all human beings. So a lot of times when my colleagues would think sort of top down and try to tell people what to do, I felt equal, and how could I facilitate people? And in that vein, when I worked with I worked with these very severely disturbed schizophrenics, and I was very concerned about them having control of their lives. People felt because they were ill, others should control them. So a lot of that comes from that. And what's interesting, because we talk about relationships, if you ask my wife what she liked about me on the first date, she will say it was the way I talked about schizophrenics. She'll say that's what appealed to her. Of course, other people hear that and they say they have trouble relating to it. But it's really true. She's a therapist as well, retired, and we had this common view that was part of our foundation, which had to do with our view on humanity, and that, nobody's better than anyone else.
That's what, not the normal conversation you would think on the first date, I must say, but that you were sharing your views on.
Well, we were both in the field, and interestingly, the thing that when we go back and talk about what appealed to each other, the first thing that appealed to me about her, in addition that she's hot, the first thing that appealed to me, in addition to being very attracted to her, is she talked to me about her first husband. And so she was married twice. I've been married 3 times. And in talking about her first husband, it was clear that although they broke up, she had an enduring love for him. And some people might be upset about that. But for me, it was like I was so used to friends who would be in relationships and they'd end, and then they would just rail against the person as if this person suddenly switched from being an adored person to the devil. And I would hear that so often. And I think I was just enchanted by the idea that this woman, and it was clear the relationship couldn't work out, but that this woman could have sustaining love. So that appealed to me. And I know a lot of people don't relate to that as something. But once again, when I say what appeals to me about her and what appeals to her about me, one of the unique things about relationships is we're all unique. It's interesting. I've been reading a book by a friend of mine, Ron Enfield, who actually writes this amazing memoir of his wife. It's got her writings. She's deceased. So he fills in the blanks, and I'm only halfway through, so I don't know how beautiful of a relationship I'll see it, but it's a real relationship, and it's been captivating for me.
When you talk about a real relationship, you're talking about what it is between the two people, not what other people are seeing. And right. When we started talking about doing this podcast, you had told me about an instance where you were out with a couple other couples and your observations that you were fascinated by it. So do you want to share? Because I'm sure all of us have been with other couples when we see.
Oh, yeah. Well,
you saw.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. We had 4 couples over for a party. Just to get together. And we were all in our backyard. It was a nice day. And 2 of them were just cutting each other down consistently. That was dominating the conversation. Cut each other down. There was a 3rd couple that didn't seem as motivated to cut each other down, but almost seemed like they wanted to get into the flow of things. So they'd say a couple of negative things about the other one. You almost felt it was forced. And then there was my wife and me, and then there was this other couple, and we were stone silent. We had nothing to say. We had nothing to say to join the conversation. And in many ways, if you think about what I saw there, and you listen to comedians talk about relationships, and you think about hearing your friends bitch about relationships, you would almost think that there's no such thing as a good relationship. And as I said, these people that are fighting, I hear it. The 2 couples that were not fighting, people don't know anything about what happens. And I feel like people need to have some sort of models and need to hear, well, how do relationships click? What actually happens?
Well, why don't we jump in there, Ken? Why don't you talk about the inner workings of relationships?
Well, relationships are very unique. So the relationship that works for me is not necessarily the relationship that works for you. They're very, very, very idiosyncratic, and they involve 2 people who, at one point in time, make a decision that they appeal to each other. They get into that relationship based on a tidbit of information. If you think of the complexity of human beings, we fall head over heels for someone, and we don't know a lot about them. And then generally, I don't know that I have any dated a support system, but I believe it's about 2 years to get to know someone well enough that you really know them. And then when you think about it, we have all these intimate relationships in our lives, our parents, our children, our siblings, they're all blood relationships. They all have that kind of unconditional love in them. But then you have your partner, and that's your one relationship of choice. And a lot of people don't embrace the fact that it's not an unconditional relationship. They don't embrace the fact that there's beauty in choice, that you chose this person. And if you're going to be with the person a long time, my wife and I have been together over 40 years, there's a continuing choice. And the choice occurs in 10 years, and 20 years, and 30 years. And then the question is, so what goes into having that continued choice, and what goes into then being able to sustain it? And I guess the other thing, unless you want to interrupt with a question, if you can, I guess the other thing that I mentioned this to you in our private conversations, is that relationships have inherent challenges because they're two different human beings that have chosen to join their lives. And if you're two different people and you choose to join your lives, you're not clones of each other. And a lot of times, the things that that didn't seem like problems when you were dating, suddenly you're in the same house. Maybe you're married, you have shared finances, and what ends up happening is you start to see the differences. And then the question is, what do you do with those differences? I tend to think of the 5 main areas of differences that evolve over the course of a relationship being the environment. I mean, honestly, my wife saw what a pigsty I lived in when we dated. That doesn't mean I suddenly become a neat person when we come together. So what do you do when you have difference? Suddenly you have a shared environment. What do you do with differences? You have shared finances. Two functioning independent people able to handle their lives. Maybe they handle finances differently. What do you do when you're together and you're joined at the hip, particularly if you're legally married and you're a financial unit? Children, if you choose to have children, there's all sorts of child rearing styles. Some people are very strict, some are lenient. Some would make some are very, very protective, some are more carefree. And if an accident, an injury happens, it's okay. But now you've got two people that are both certainly within the realm of being able to raise children, and they have to raise them together. And how do you handle those differences? The fourth area is personal time and space. What do you do? In terms of what the other person can do. Like, I'm a tennis player. I know in my marriage that anytime I want to play tennis, that's not a problem. If I have friends, male or female, I know that getting together with them is not a problem. Well, for some people, it is a problem. For some people, getting together with someone of the opposite sex for lunch, which either my wife and I would do, it creates a problem for them. Now, I, as a psychologist, could prescribe to you, don't feel that way, or work it out as a problem. But the reality is, for some people, they need to be together a lot of the time. For other people, they can do independent activities. And then the fifth area is sex. People get together based on an attraction. They may not notice differences in sexuality. And then as the course of relationship goes on, things happen. You have children, you get older. Maybe you have physiological changes in your functioning. How do you sustain a meaningful and satisfactory sexual relationship, allowing for the fact that as you proceed down this journey, there's going to be differences?
When we were talking about this topic, you talked about, the sort of stereotypical issue with sex in couples and intimacy. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Well, yeah, and I put it in the context. It was actually one of the major insights that came to my wife and I in our marriage. And it was it was really it was really a game changer. It was really very important. And that is the question of intimacy and sex. And one of the things we realized is that, and again, this is a stereotype, it may not always be this way, but in general, women tend to seek intimacy as a conduit towards sex. They get intimate, it feels romantic, there's a very positive feeling, and it leads to feeling desire. Men have more of a tendency to seek sex, and that becomes a conduit to intimacy. So in the end, many times women and men have the same goals. They both want to be intimate, they both want to have a sexual relationship. But if they don't understand this key piece, then if you're a woman, you might start to feel like you're an object, like you're just being used. If you're a man, you might feel like the woman is withholding. And it comes from a failure to recognize that you're not exactly the same, and that but you really desire the same goals, which is to have an intimate, an erotic relationship that's satisfactory. But people pull apart from each other because women do feel like they're being objectified, and men do feel like they're being deprived.
And you also talked about the sort of traits and characteristics that one looks for in a mate, and how much they're willing to give and take. Why don't you talk some about that?
Sure. So in terms of, well, the give and take is a little different, but in terms of the traits, uh, everybody's different. What appeals to me may not be what appeals to you, Vince, or anybody else here that's watching. But one of the things I like to do is ask somebody, what are the three most important things for you? What do you value the most in another person? What are you looking for? And people will come up with traits, uh, some people have humor on it, some people will have empathy, some people will have being a giving person, altruistic, some people may have similar political views. I mean, whatever it is that matters to you, we're all different. People will come up with these three traits. And then I will say to someone, so what's the fourth most important trait? And they tell you the fourth trait, and they say, okay, so if you could find someone who had 1, 2, and 3, but didn't have 4, would you be happy with that person? And some people would, and a lot of people wouldn't. So if you wouldn't be happy with number 4, you go down to, well, if you could find someone with 1, 2, 3, and 4, what's number 5? And they tell you number 5. Well, what if you found 1, 2, 3, and 4, but that person didn't have number 5? And you can just go down the list and start to understand both what people are looking for in a relationship, but also, what they're willing to have and what they're willing to not have. And generally, it seems to me that people that can limit themselves to 3 at most 4 traits have the happiest relationships. And people that cannot let go of anything. I have a very good friend, like a friend I've had for years. I've known him just as long as my wife. And I love this guy, but he's by himself. And once we did this with him, and I think we went down to 12 traits, and he couldn't give any of them up, and it's not surprising. You're by yourself here. He's a great guy, but he can't let go of that. So it's like I ask people, what do you really want in somebody? Now, of course, you meet people that are already in relationships. So what do you want? And maybe that person doesn't have it. And then, of course, that brings you to decision time. What do you want to do about it? Which could be to work it out the best you can, might be to dissolve the relationship, but that's important to say, does the person have what you really value?
When does this apply? I'm just thinking of your, relationships by choice. Friendships. You know, I don't think we ever really think about friendships in quite the same manner as what traits we're looking for in a friend. Often we stumble on them and just take them in. Is it different or is it similar?
Well, I think an intimate, monogamous relationship is very unique. Um, you know, as I said, I have this great friend that I've known for years. It would kill me to live with him. It just wouldn't work. And in fact, I mentioned to you, my wife, each of us have one longstanding friend that we knew before we met. And she is a friend who I love her and my wife loves her. And actually when my our first was born, we were in the middle of a move to Indiana. We lived in New York City. We were in the middle of this move. I'd gotten a new job, and my wife developed a serious illness and needed surgery. So we take the vans. We're going cross country. The first stop is in Indianapolis at the hospital to see a doctor to plan the surgery. Then we go to our new house, load up
Oh,
the house,
wow.
and then she comes back for her operation. And meanwhile, I've got a 2-year-old there and a new job. So my wife's best friend flew in from New York to Indiana to help us out. And so I had about a week with her where we were in the house together. And, she took care of our son during the daytime. And then at night, she and I would have dinner and we'd have breakfast in the morning. And within a couple days, if I ever imagine, she's a dear friend, but it's like she would be terrible for me. She just, and it's like it's at the uniqueness of the relationship. I don't know if I actually answered your question. I'm not sure if
No,
I.
no, you did. It's different. You don't have, it sounds like you don't need that list with friendships because it's not an intimate relationship.
Yes. No, it's a very different thing. Now, obviously, there are people you don't want as your friend. That you find them boring, uninteresting. You don't have things in common. I mean, there's 7 billion people on the planet, and if you ask me, well, how many people do I have friends, or we could define it as acquaintances, it's a infinitesimal number of people compared to all the people on the planet. So we become friends with a few people, uh, but those people don't always have to have the same qualities that we want with someone who we're going to live with. We're going to share finances. We're going to raise children together. We're going to struggle with the different things we do together indifferently, and we're going to be in a intimate bond. We're going to be in an intimate, physical relationship for years. That's going to go on for years. So it's very different than I think a friend.
What about some of the old myths? You have to be friends first. Does that hold for most people?
Well, I don't know what for most people. Uh, my I was brought up in a Jewish home with certain standards, mores, beliefs about marriage. I know lots of people were born in other religious homes that also had certain messages. So I grew up with certain messages about relationships, sexuality, marriage, and so forth. So for many people, their religious beliefs may take them in a certain direction where they really want to know someone as a friend and maybe married, or maybe at least close enough to married, or they may have suffered some sexual trauma, and there may be a reason why someone is hesitant because of bad past experiences. They may have beliefs like that. So I can't say what's the best way or not. But for me, they said I've been married 3 times. My wife has been married 2 times. And for me, it seems very clear that it is better to have sex early in a relationship before you get committed. That if you develop if you get hooked up on somebody and you really want to be with them and you're in love with them, then you don't really have an opportunity to know whether you're sexually compatible. Now, again, it's a matter of the person, but my wife is the daughter of a Baptist minister, so we both were brought up in fairly religious areas. We raised all our children with the idea that that you should, have experiences and not feel like you're constrained.
So what did we miss? What's something what advice would you give if you are struggling with your current relationship or looking for a relationship, or have chosen, because you have free will, to not have a relationship at a certain point in your life?
Well, I would recommend, if someone is in a relationship, I would recommend that the most important thing to do is to listen. I think people I cannot tell you how many people either come into my office as a couple or tell me about things as individuals, how they are telling their partner for the 1,001st time what they've said 1,000 times already. And the partner is responding with the same response they heard 1,000 times. You see it all the time. And people are debating their points. And to me, listening is the most powerful piece of a relationship. If my wife is upset and she comes in upset, I go into, we just talk freely, but if I see she's upset about something, I go into intense listening mode. And I listen to her and I bite my tongue from responding. Whether if I disagree, I simply listen. You can always give feedback in an hour, tomorrow. You can always say, I'll chew on that, I'll think about it. Not responding is not the same as agreement. But if there's an intense feeling, then I listen. And the same thing I expect of myself. My life goes pretty well. I'm not usually despondent or upset about something. But if something bothers me and I share it with her, I expect her to hear it. Again, I don't expect agreement, and I'm not intending to say it 1,000 times. I'm going to say it once, maybe a couple times. I'm going to make sure that she understands what I'm saying, and then I drop it. And then it's like, maybe it'll agree. Oh, and the other thing, this is the other thing we do, and it can be hard for some people, is we have a kind of automatic deferring to the person for whom the issue is more important. And for some people, everything's important. You want something, and anything you want, you have to have. So for those people, this is somewhat difficult. But if you're somebody that can, have opinions or ideas or desires, and there's a hierarchy with them, then there are things that can go your way, and there's things that can go the other person's way. And basically what we did over years is we've just learned to sense with each other who's more important, whose decision, give you an example. The guy who does our gardening today came and finished the gardening work, and I usually handle the payments. So my wife told me he showed up today, he finished the work, and she gave him a check. I have no idea how much money she gave him. I can tell you for sure it's substantially more money than I would have given him if I was here. But so what? So what? It's like that was her. She was in control. She makes a decision, and I know she's going to make a different decision than me. That's a small issue, but there are other things where we have ideas about the children. There are many times that, we've made decisions for the children, which are what I think is best. And there's many times we made decisions for the children that she thinks is best. I mean, our children are, all adults, they're all in their 30s, but, we've listened to each other and we've sort of deferred to who feels more strongly about whatever the issue is.
And raising children can really stress even the best relationship, can it?
Oh yeah, I once read. I get these little I get this newsletter, that has that just summarizes research, and so you keep up to date on things. And I saw the results of a study once. This was several years ago, in which they tried to find out what characteristics, what led to marital satisfaction and or not. And they went through all sorts of qualities. And as I said, all relationships are different. They went through all sorts of qualities, and they only found correlations between two qualities and marital happiness. And the two qualities were time together correlated positively with happiness, children correlated negatively with happiness.
Wow.
And all the other differences that existed between couples, it didn't seem to, it wasn't like there was one right way or not, which I'm not arguing to end the population of the planet by not having children, but it was interesting. It caught my attention.
Well, that is great. What else, Ken? What are other things that we can do to enrich our relationships?
Well, I mean, the things I said, I think are most of what I meant, but I also think it's important to to talk to people and find out, ask them to share and to be, candid with you about, well, what is your relationship like? I think knowing what relationships are like, I mean, we just don't do that, it feels intrusive, but I've often said, as I said, I think my wife and I have a good relationship, and a lot of people we know feel that too. Her nieces have commented on that. This best friend has commented on it, and that I mentioned, that who came to help us, and she sort of went to the extreme and said she doesn't know of anybody that's happy marriage than us. And then it hit me. So she never asks us what our marriage is like. It's like, it's not, none of these people, if they've had problems, they haven't said, well, what makes it work? What's going on in your house that you appear to be so happy? I would tell anybody, I'm telling strangers. I mean, I would tell anybody, who wanted to know, here's how Marika and we work things out. Here's how we, enhance each other's lives. And those ways may not work for others, but at least it's one point of knowing about what relationships are like. I think people are in the dark, and I think it helps not just to hear the complaints, but to really get a true picture. That's why I mentioned Ron's book. I sent Ron an email yesterday letting him know that I was going to plug his book today. And I was going to be talking about good relationships. And he said, well, I'm only halfway through the book, you'll see different things. But I know he loved his wife. I know that's for sure, and there's no question. But he's really taken this huge step. It's a candid step to just go out there and tell the world honestly how their relationship evolved. And whether or not friends or people will do that, but I don't think there's any harm in asking and trying to get a sense, how do you deal with this type of problem? How do you manage? And again, I divide it in these 5 areas: the environment, money, children, personal time and space, and sex. And you're going to ask, how do you deal with it? How does it work for you?
One thing you didn't talk about, and I'm going to say that you're it's a given for you, is trust, supportive, all the terms that we always hear. And I'm just assuming that that's because that's a given to you, correct? That's a must.
No, it's not a given. It's
Oh, okay.
it's one of a variety of words that can be used for your 3 traits you're allowed to ask for. You know, it's not like there's those givens. What is most important to you? And trust may be most important. Support may be most important. Um, I mean,
Respect.
for me, I don't need a lot of support. In fact, my wife is a very naturally supportive person. I think one of the things that shocked her was that early in the relationship, a lot of this, she's just a caretaking person. That was nice, but that was not the reason why I was with her, But for someone else, that would be real important. So I'm saying don't have givens. Think about what is it you really want, because what you really want may, you know, it doesn't have to be everything.
Well, Ken, I cannot thank you enough. I feel like this was very informative and very different when we think about relationships. So thank you for doing this.
Sure.
And if everyone enjoyed what they heard, you can visit the Starting Points Education channel and listen. There's a place for a donation that will continue to support us. So thank you very much. Thank you for all of you who have joined us tonight. And next week, we will be talking about cognitive behavioral therapy. We like to say why it means what you say to yourself. So we're really going to be talking about, Melissa Yeager will be joining us. So we look forward to seeing you again next time. Have a great evening.